All right, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Fish North Georgia podcast. It's been a long time since I got to sit down one-on-one with somebody, but I got a very special guest on this episode for you. Mr. Tim Hancock is in the house, and if you don't know Tim, by the end of this, you will. Got a lot of experience. I'm not calling him old or anything right now. Now, he might make a comment about that here in a little bit, but listen, pay attention to this because we got a great story. We're going to learn a little bit more about Tim. And if you pay attention to some of the fishing stuff as we get on into it, you're going to learn a little bit. The man has, I guess mastered might be a good word. He might disagree with me, but mastered the art of catching big bass. And that's what I know him. He's a good friend of us here at the store, but that's how I know him, as a man that has not only caught a lot of big bass, but as you're about to find out, one of the, if not the best record keeper I have ever met in my life when it comes to this. This guy has stats. He takes a lot of pride in what he does, but he's also very detail oriented. I think you guys are really going to enjoy this. And so without further ado, Mr. Tim Hancock, how are you today, buddy?
Still above ground.
Still above ground. Still above ground. How old are you now? I'm going to get it out of the way quick.
I'm 70.
70. So, like I said, a lot of experience on the water.
There ain't a whole lot of us really old guys still around, especially old guys that power fish.
But you look good.
Well, it's like the little cartoon you see about the duck sitting on the water.
Uh-huh.
He's just calm, but underneath the feet are just going 900 miles an hour.
Is that it?
That's me.
Well, we all get to that. So, but blessed for you to be here today. Really thankful, and so I appreciate you taking some time. I want the listeners / viewers to get to know you a little bit better. So let me throw you a good softball question to start. Tell me about your earliest memory of fishing and where it occurred.
I was born in Decatur, Texas, which is about 50 miles northwest of Fort Worth.
You know, you look like a Texan.
I am.
There you go.
Sometimes I don't feel like claiming it, but
that's another podcast all in itself.
But I grew up in Fort Worth and lived about, I'm going to say 3 blocks at the very most from the Trinity River in Fort Worth. And the Trinity River was my babysitter.
Right.
If parents today, if they let their kids do what my parents let me do, they'd be arrested for child neglect. But that was just the way it was back then. And I would spend as much time down there on that river as I could. It was mostly river, but there was one little section that we went to. We called it the Rapids, and it was more like a little series of pools. And now that I think about it, I'm wondering if they weren't like fish traps, fish weirs built by the Native Americans.
Quite possible.
And the best sad thing is, some years later they just dredged it all out for barge traffic, I was told, and it's gone, completely gone. But I stayed down there, and I mean, it was all I could. And I would take my little fishing pole down there, and I would catch little minnows and use them for bait. Or I would take a piece of bologna and cut it up in little pieces. Bologna and use it for bait, and just catch all kinds of little fish and stuff, turtles, snakes, salamanders. Bring them home. I've had every kind of pet you can imagine, just about. I've had hawks. I've had owls. I had a fox. I had a deer. I've had flying squirrels, gray squirrels, fox squirrels, every kind of pet you can imagine. Me and my roommate were going to buy a bear one time.
Buy a bear,
but we thought better.
That's an interesting conversation. I'd like to have heard that one.
You could buy them back in the 70s, 80s. There was a place in Oklahoma that sold it called Grove and Otter Pet Ranch. I bought a baby red-tailed hawk from them, and it arrived dead, unfortunately. So they said have my money back or get another thing. So I bought a baby gray fox. Meanest little thing you ever saw in your life. It like it tore my arm off.
That is interesting.
It got loose and I didn't go look for it. But anyway, my days on the river ended one day when I came home toting a baby copperhead.
Okay.
My parents lost their mind and I couldn't go back anymore.
But it's interesting. You said about how old are you when we're doing all this?
Oh God, 9, 10.
9 and 10. I don't think kids today could even fathom getting to do that.
No.
Unless maybe you lived way out in the country. But,
I wouldn't let my kids do it.
Right.
I wouldn't let my kids swim in Allatoona. And they asked me why. I said, you go into that water and you're out of sight, you're gone.
Yeah.
You know, you got a pool is one thing, a lake is, and I would never let my kids go swim in Allatoona, and they didn't much like it, but that's just the way it was.
Well, you use a good parrot.
But that river down there also had alligator gar in it, giant alligator gar. I remember we were wading the pool one day, and it was about waist deep. My brother and some other people were down there, and I stepped on what I thought was a log. I mean, it was this big around, and I stepped on it, and it took off.
That would have been enough to get me out of the river.
Yeah, well, we were stupid, so we were trying to figure out how to catch it.
Well, you know, that's the way we grew up back in the day.
But there was a liquor store right across the street from where our path went down to the river, and the lady that owned the liquor store had a bunch of cats. So I made a deal with her, or she made a deal with me, that I would bring her a small bucket full of shad when I could come home, and she would give me a Coke.
The good old barter system.
Yeah. And I did that. And then my grandparents lived up there close to where I was born. So we spent a lot of time in the woods and out in the creeks, and we would go seining. I don't even know if people know what that is.
I just learned.
It's like a big long net type thing, only real fine mesh, and a big pole on each side, and weights on the bottom, and you get in the creek and you go along, and you see what you come up with.
It's got the weighted bottom to make sure it maintains bottom. And
yep. And we would do stuff like that. And I some reason or another, I got to the irrational fear that I was going to step on a snapping turtle. And that was the end of my seining days.
I understand that.
I caught a snapping turtle one time on a jig. I had a 74 El Camino, and that snapping turtle was so big that it crawled out of the bed of my El Camino twice.
Oh, that's a grown one.
I mean, an El Camino, that was the 74 was the big one.
Yeah.
I mean, the tailgate was that high, and that sucker crawled out of it. And I've just had a healthy respect for those critters ever since.
Probably a very smart thing. So how long did you live in that area?
I was there. I was there till I was about 10, fourth grade. Fifth grade, we were in California.
Okay.
San Diego. And I remember we used to go snorkeling at the beach, and I came face to face with an octopus. Coolest thing I ever saw in my life. I was going to catch it.
Of course.
It was about that long,
yeah,
about that big around. And I thought I had him cornered in some rocks, and there was a little hole, crack about that big. That sucker went through that hole.
Yeah, they're notorious. Yeah.
But that was one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my life.
But that's a big jump from Texas to California.
Yeah. And my parents were having trouble.
Okay.
So we went out, and then I did the fifth grade in right outside of San Francisco.
Okay.
Sixth grade, we come back to Fort Worth, and spend there. And really, I was so far away from the river then I didn't get to go anymore. But and then the seventh grade, we went to West Texas, out San Angelo, and out there wasn't really a whole lot of fishing at first until I met a kid I went to school with and went to his house, and he lived real close to the Concho River. Well, here we go again.
Right.
And we're out there in a kayak and whatnot. And that was where I caught my first 2 big bass.
Okay.
2 back-to-back 5-pounders on all things a spinnerbait.
A spinnerbait. And we're definitely going to get in talking about that here in a little while.
And just to show everybody, I brought it. One just like it. It's an old, what they call a Shannon twin spin.
A Shannon twin spin.
Yep.
Okay. So it's got, 2.
Yep.
2 blades on 2 arms that come up.
Only the one I used was white.
Okay.
But that's
and I noticed that's not the material is more of like
it's a hair
jig kind of thing.
And as a matter of fact, it's so old, it's the hair is beginning to rot.
How old do you reckon that is that you got in your hand out there?
Over 50 years.
Over 50 years old.
Yeah. Because I mean, I was like 13.
That is a big difference than the ones they're making today. Yeah.
And we also had those big alligator gar in that river. So we would take our little Zebco 33s and our little Castmaster spoons, and when they'd come up to gulp air, we'd throw out in front of them, and they would grab our little spoon, and they would just spool us.
Right.
And then we'd have to go home because we'd have any more line.
I often say that everybody at one time or another, at least us older ones, we have had the experience with Zebco 33s.
Oh,
I
God,
think
yeah.
that is the reel that built America, if you ask me.
33s, 202s.
Exactly.
I've got Zebco 1. I've still got some.
You can catch anything on a
Yeah,
Zebco.
anytime I want to take a kid fishing or something like that, or my daughters use them they would go fishing with me a little bit. And now my oldest daughter knows this girl who's got a little boy. He's like 2 years old. And when he gets a little bit older, I'll take him to the lake and see what happens.
That's awesome.
And
so you're fighting, I guess what I'm noticing though, a lot of river in your earlier experiences. So we're not hitting big lakes and stuff.
There were some lakes around, but I never did fish on them. I'm in Fort Worth. There was like Lake Worth and Benbrook and some Eagle Mountain and lakes like that. But I guess I did actually go fishing on Eagle Mountain one time. I bought this lure called a Vibra-Bat.
A Vibra-Bat.
Yeah, crazy thing. I should have brought it.
So you still have it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got some. Right. I don't have it, but I've got
you have some.
Yeah, that's the thing I'm going to try to do is that I made a post here a while back that some of these old obscure lures, I'm going to try to take them this year and try to catch fish on every one of them.
That's awesome.
And it's one of them.
Okay,
a Vibra-Bat. Try to catch another fish on that. I may have to make a new skirt for it. I don't know.
You might, but that's okay. That'd be neat.
But we fished a little bit there. A few bass, nothing to get excited about. And then, but the gar were the thing when I lived in San Angelo out in West Texas, trying to catch one of those cotton. And there was just no catching one of them with that kind of tackle. I mean, my God, these fish weighed 150, 200 pounds.
On a Zebco.
You know, yeah,
what was you thinking?
Yeah, we weren't. We were just, bye.
But as a kid, that would be fun.
Oh, God, yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, hook a giant fish like that.
The tug is the drug.
Yeah. And, granted, it was over in about 5 seconds.
But hey, listen.
I'd save up my allowance, go get some more line, go get another spoon, and we go try again.
Listen, I think that would be fantastic.
But it was fun. Then after that, we wound up in Arkansas for about 6 years. And that was about the time I just kind of blew off fishing and everything because the hormones had kicked in. Mm-hmm. And I had a whole other set of priorities.
I understand that. We all go through that phase.
I hunted more than I fished when I lived in Arkansas because I lived about 20 miles from Stuttgart, which is billed as the duck capital of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I have seen the skies absolutely black with ducks. But we deer hunted a little bit. We duck hunted. We did a lot of rabbit hunting. This guy, older guy, kind of took me under his wing. He had a pack of beagles. And the farmers would actually come to us and ask us to go hunt rabbits in their soybean fields.
Keep them from eating the crops.
They said, just don't shoot the deer. So, and we killed rabbits. And his mother-in-law could cook. She squirrel dumplings, rabbit dumplings. Oh, God. Fried rabbit.
If you say that to a lot of people these days, hey, we're having some squirrel dumplings or we're having fried rabbit, they would look at you like you're crazy, but I don't think they understand what they're missing.
Oh, well, it's all about if it can be prepared right.
Mm-hmm.
This lady could do it. I just pretty much lived over there.
I don't blame you.
And then after high school, I moved to the big city and went even crazier for 3, 4, 5 years, and then wound up in Austin, Texas. No hunting and fishing there at all. Hunting, but not.
I understand. We're still in the hormone phase.
Austin is the coolest place I have ever lived in my life.
Really?
Yes.
What's so cool about Austin?
University of Texas, the progressive country scene was going on back then in the early 70s. Just an amazing place to live. 24/7, all the Tex-Mex stuff. Just amazing.
It's almost like what you're saying is the perfect place for a good-looking single guy.
Oh, God.
Is Austin, Texas.
Well, I lived there too, but it was okay. But yeah, it was amazing. And then moved to Dallas, got transferred up there. I was working for a construction company, built bridges.
Okay.
And they transferred us to Dallas. So I stayed there a few years and that was more of the same. And then,
I'm not judging you, my man.
And then we got transferred to Georgia.
Okay.
And I fought it tooth and nail. I said, I have not lost anything in Georgia. I don't want to go to Georgia. And they kept on. I said, just try it. Just go try it for a month. And if you don't like it, we'll bring you back. We'll move you back. Well, here I still am.
You're still here.
I got married, got domesticated.
That's a good way of saying it.
Met my wife, and then I think I told you once before, me and her brother-in-law started. He fished. So we started fishing together. And there it went.
There it went.
And it's been to the wall ever since.
That's a very interesting story. Now, growing up, who was your biggest influence as far as fishing before we get to Georgia, like back in those Texas days?
Oh, I didn't even know anything about fishing back then.
Okay, so
I mean, as far as there were no professional fishermen back in the 60s and early 70s.
okay, so basically, just you grew up that way. It was just something that
it was just something everybody
you were born into.
Yeah,
it was a culture.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Now you get to Georgia.
Yeah.
Now, real quick before we get into all the fishing, from Georgia to Texas, what are the biggest differences, plus or minus either way, back then?
The weather.
So you like the weather in Georgia better or Texas?
No, I've been here 40-something years, and I still hadn't got used to this blasted humidity.
It is different.
I mean, if you go down around Houston is like Georgia.
Okay.
But up where I was from, Dallas, Fort Worth, that area,
that dry west
hot.
heat.
It's hot, but it's dry. It's the humidity is real low.
Yeah.
90 degrees there does not feel like 90 degrees here.
For sure.
You walk outside here and it's like you can swim in the air. And it keeps me off the lake a lot.
It takes some getting used to, and some people never do.
I'm not going to.
Yeah.
If I hadn't got used to it by now, I'm not going to.
How long you been in Georgia now?
Moved here in 76.
Okay.
So
nice chunk of time.
Yeah.
Nice chunk of time. So you start fishing with your brother-in-law.
Yep.
Okay. What kind of fishing are we doing? Are we fishing tournaments or bass fishing? Or are we fishing tournaments or just joy fishing?
We piddled around for a couple of years, and then he got into bass club. Then I got into bass club with him, and I fished it for a year. And I came to the conclusion real fast: I don't care for bass tournaments. I don't want to have to fish a certain lake a certain day for certain hours for a certain fish. I want to fish when I want to fish, where I want to fish, how I want to fish, and for what I want to fish.
Okay.
If I could catch stripers and hybrids on artificial bait like I catch bass, I quit bass fishing.
Interesting. Now, why is that?
They're bigger and they're stronger.
You just like the fight again.
Yo,
reminds you of those gar back when you were younger, I guess.
Yeah, only I can put some of these in the boat now.
Yeah, that's right. Your equipment has been upgraded just a little bit.
I've stepped forward in time a little bit.
Okay.
But
you still fish for them at all?
If they're around, I'll fish for them.
Okay.
I mean, I run across some bass fishing. I was on Carter's one day. I think it was in '98, and I was up there bass fishing. My little slider head, what you call a shaky head now.
Mm-hmm.
This was like in the late '90s, and all of a sudden behind me it was like somebody was dropping cinder blocks out of a helicopter. Just
big old splashes.
Big, huge blow. I'm like, oh my God. I grabbed a top water, hummed it out there, and caught a 25-pound striper. Wow.
Yeah, I can imagine.
For an hour and a half, all I did was fight fish. I put 3 in the boat and I lost 3. But that was pretty special.
Absolutely.
And then another day, I caught a 16-pound hybrid on one of my big old spinnerbaits.
That's a pretty good size hybrid.
I tell you what, if you tied the striper, the 25-pound striper, and the 16-pound hybrid tail to tail, the hybrid would drag the striper all over the lake.
Okay, I haven't heard that.
There was no contest, and I had the hybrid on a lot heavier tackle. The 25-pound striper was just on a 7.5-foot rod with a top water plug and 20-pound line. The hybrid was on an 8-foot swim bait rod with 30-pound line and my big spinnerbait. And I've never in my life felt a mouth hook fish pull like that.
Now, I know you're not a biologist, but why do you think that is?
Well, I think the way the bodies are built, stripers are more of an elongated, slender fish, where the hybrids is built more like a line of white bass. Because I mean, that's part what they are. They're
right.
Part white, part striper. But they've got that wider tail, that wider body, and they are just flat stronger.
So if you had to choose between the two, you like hybrids better?
Oh God, yes.
Okay. All right.
They also tolerate warm water a little better, so you got a little bit bigger window of opportunity to catch them on artificial bait.
Okay.
Stripers in the summertime, you about gonna have to troll for them or use some kind of live bait or something like that, and I ain't going there.
I understand that.
If I can't catch them on artificial, they will not be caught.
Okay, and that's pretty much how you fish now. You're 100% artificial.
Yeah, I hadn't used live bait. I can't even remember.
Right. Now, did your brother-in-law influence you more into how you fish for bass? And we're going to get into how you fish for them today, but did he influence that?
Oh God, yes.
Okay.
Him and a guy named Gary Fowler.
Okay, tell us about that.
Gary runs. I was in the bass club with Gary and Ernie,
Mm-hmm.
and I mentioned this on a podcast I was on a long time ago. We were in a tournament, and Gary Fowler, he won it. He caught a 9 something on a spinnerbait at Sinclair, and then the following month at Hartwell, we fished the tournament, and it was won with an 11 something that was caught on the spinnerbait.
Mm.
And then one day we're at Wise, and my brother-in-law whips out this big giant spinnerbait he's heard about. They called it back then. They called it Okeechobee Special. Roland Martin kind of made it famous. Big spinnerbait with a big number 7 willow leaf blade and a little Colorado blade. Big giant thing, but it wasn't very heavy. It weighed like ½ ounce, 3/4 ounce, something like that. He pulled that thing out over Wise, and I just, you got to be kidding.
Why are you throwing that?
Wasting time. No, he started catching fish on it, and not necessarily big fish. And it took off from there. My crankbait spinner. I started out throwing a jig. I threw a jig a lot.
Right.
I would drag a jig all day long. And then the crankbaits and the spinnerbaits came along, and I just don't have the patience for jig fishing or worm fishing anymore. I'll do it if I have to.
Right.
But it's got to be a case of, that or nothing.
Yeah, in some of our conversations previous to this recording, you've mentioned you don't like throwing worms.
Last year, I did not catch a fish in all of 2022 on a worm. Not one single fish on a worm, and one on a jig.
But how much time did you really give them? You spend most of your time with other stuff.
Yeah, but if I come to a spot, and they don't hit my spinnerbait or my big swim bait or whatever,
mm-hmm.
if I think there should be a fish there, I'll pick up my little finesse worm, or I'll pick up a jig and throw it in there and see what happens. And if that's what they want, then that's what I'll give them. But I only give them that after they turn down my primary choices.
Right.
Worms are last resorts.
Okay. So your love though for the spinnerbait, which is what I know you mostly from, started right there from Mr. Fowler, and just seeing the success.
Yeah. And the one that Gary was throwing, I'm pretty sure it was not a particularly big one. It was just like a ½ ounce spinnerbait with like a number 5 single blade, something like that, I think. I'm not positive because I never did ask him, but that seemed to be the thing back then.
Mm-hmm.
And I caught a lot of fish on that very spinnerbait too. ½ ounce old bush hog spinnerbait with a single number 5 hammered copper Colorado blade. And then we started getting into the big blades and big chartreuse, and it just, that's why we talked about the records.
Yeah.
That's where I keep track of all this stuff. And I can look back and see the progression of the effectiveness of these lures when I started making the switch. And it's, when you've got a lure you've caught over 400 5-pound plus bass on, you got yourself something.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And that's what the records are for.
Well, I mentioned the records earlier, so let's kind of, we're going to kind of shift into how you fish now and the records and all that. When did you start keeping records and why?
1979.
1979.
I started doing it because my brother-in-law started doing it, and I thought that was a really good idea. And so I started keeping track of every fishing trip, the weather, the conditions, the water color, the water temperature, what I caught, how many I caught them on, what they weighed, how many hours I fished. And at the end of the year, I would do a little chart and do a summary. January I caught this many on this, and February I caught, and it totaled it all up. And you just keep track of that. And when you start making these changes, that's when you start seeing the shift in the production. And that's all I want to be, is efficient. I don't like to waste time. That's why if you ever saw my boat right now, you'd probably pass out.
And why is that?
Because I got 23 rods out on deck.
Yeah, I probably would. That would drive me crazy.
But every one of them's got something different. Every one of them has a different purpose. People used to always harass me about it and say, why you got so many rods? You can't use but one at a time. I said, you play golf? Well, yeah. I said, you just go to the golf course with one club?
Mm-hmm.
No. I said, there you go. He said, it's not the same thing. I said, no, it's exactly the same thing. I said, I have each rig is a different tool for a different job. I said, granted, I may fish all day long and not touch but 3 rods, but I like the option. I don't want to have to stop, cut one off, retie another one to do this. If I see a situation, I want to reach down, pick up a rod and go.
That's a very good analogy, the golf analogy. I haven't heard anybody mention it that way, but now that you say it, it makes sense.
Yeah. I said, you don't drive with a putter, and you don't putt with a driver. You don't throw a swim bait with a finesse with a shaky head rod,
Exactly.
And you don't throw a shaky head with an 8-foot heavy action swim bait rod.
Now, when you started doing this, is this something that you kind of, I'm trying to get your personality, that you did in other aspects? Yeah. Well, in other aspects of your life, were you that detail oriented, or was it just something about fishing that made you say, you know what, I need to keep track?
The funny thing is, I hated math in school with a passion. Mm-hmm. And now I keep these records. I keep fish per hour, keepers per hour. How many hours did I fish? How many keepers how many, man hours, all that kind of stuff. And then at the end of the year, I do big summaries. And at the end of the decade, I do another summary. But you can look and you can see this stuff, and you can see, oh, this works now, this works here, this works better here. And it's all about being efficient. It's, I go to the lake with a plan.
Every trip.
Yeah. Even if it's a lake I've never been to before, I'm going with a plan. I'm fixing to start going to a lake in Tennessee I've never been to before, but I've already got a plan. Based
upon your previous experiences.
Well, I have no experience with this. Okay. I'm going after muskie.
It's a different animal.
Yeah. I've got the lures to do it. I've got the tackle to do it. It's just a matter of running across one.
Yes.
And that's, but this lake also has supposedly smallmouth, largemouth spots, and walleye and muskie. So I got like a smorgasbord of stuff I can go after.
You're going to enjoy the muskie once you hook it up.
Oh yeah. I'm no doubt.
You're going to enjoy that. The hit is phenomenal.
Well, I also got the figure 8 thing is what blows my mind.
I've done that. And let me go ahead and give you, there's very few things in this world I could ever give you advice on. But that figure 8, work them muscles. Because after you do that for 8 hours,
I know
you are absolutely shot.
I know.
And I thought that was the craziest thing about all of it. But a muskie is so crazy that they'll hit right at the boat.
There is a fish in Georgia called a chain pickerel, or they call them a jackfish. To me, they're miniature muskies.
Yep.
They've got the same attitude. They will just swim right up to the boat and look at you and say, I have figure 8'd them before.
Really?
Yes. There's a lake in Fayetteville called Horton. Can't fish there anymore. These counties are just getting crazy with their stupid rules now.
Yes, I've heard about Horton.
Horton, Kedron, J.W. Smith.
Got to be residents or something like that, right?
Or you can get a permit, but it's a $300 annual permit. No, thank you.
I understand.
I wouldn't fish it more than 6 times a year. I ain't paid $50 to fish anywhere.
Makes sense.
Kedron was another great lake, but Horton was just eat up with jackfish, and they were fun, Mm-hmm. But they will just swim right up to the boat and just look at you and like, we don't care. We're right. Scared of you.
I had a guy tell me about rowing down a river, guiding somebody for a muskie, and actually the muskie hitting his paddle. He said they're just crazy.
Yeah.
And they're not afraid of you because they are the apex predator where they're at, in this place. So
anyway,
great fish.
That's my plan. I'm going to drive up there probably this weekend and just kind of scout the place out. And I'm not going to fish. I'm just going to scout the place out and make sure where the boat ramp is. And the bad thing about the lake is there's not a contour map available of the thing. It was built back in the 20s, over 100 years ago.
That's pretty interesting because generally you can find a contour for any lake around.
And I hadn't found one. And I've gone on Google Earth Pro, and you can do the time lapse thing. You can go back in time. And so I've looked at it at different times and try to figure out where a safe place is to run, and where I'm going to put in. It's kind of dangerous. There's actually humps out in the middle of the lake with cypress trees growing on them. So I've got to be real careful. Once I get to a certain point, I think I'll be okay. But it's kind of a riverine type deal, so it ought to be fairly easy to fish.
Okay. Well, I wish you luck on your hunt for a muskie.
Yeah,
you're gonna like. Now, do you keep records for other fish or primarily bass?
I haven't fished for other fish in so long.
This will be a good change for you then.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure. I hope I catch some bass too, because the lures I'm throwing, they'll catch bass too. I mean, my big swim baits, I've got a picture somewhere of a spot about this long, hanging on
about a 12-inch spot hanging
on that,
which is something that you fish for muskie with there. Yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, the spot hit this thing.
They're crazy too.
Yeah. So, and I've caught bass this year that weighed like less than 4 pounds on it already this year.
Okay, we're gonna get into that.
You know,
what the spinnerbait being your first love, and for somebody that's listening that may not know you as well as we do, you like throwing the big blades, but you like throwing much heavier spinnerbaits than I would say 99% of the people we know are accustomed to. How did that come about? How'd you figure that out?
Well, Lake Ackworth.
Okay. Which is in Georgia.
Yep. It's full of grass. It ain't the lake it used to be, unfortunately. But it's got a lot of that, what I call Coosa River grass. I don't know the proper name for it, but it's the same grass that's in Wise and in Neely Henry and places like that. Allatoona flooded so bad one time. Me and my brother-in-law were fishing. We were in my boat. And Allatoona flooded so bad that it went up over the spillway at Lake Ackworth and flooded the parking lots and the boat ramps on Lake Ackworth. We went actually into Lake Ackworth from Allatoona over the spillway.
Now, is that on Highway 92? For those of you that don't know, Allatoona is one of the major impoundments in Georgia, and Lake Ackworth is divided, at least last time I went by, a 2-lane road. That's Highway 92. And so on one side you had Allatoona, and on the other side you had Ackworth. And Ackworth is about how many? It's much, much, much smaller. Few hundred
250 acres.
Yeah, so it's a very small lake sitting right beside however many thousands of acres.
The difference is the elevation of Ackworth is up here. The elevation of Allatoona at Full Pool is down here.
Is lower, yeah.
There's a spillway. Okay. So anyway, Allatoona got so high that we actually went in to Ackworth
over Highway 92
over the spillway.
Okay.
We were under highway, yeah, and we were under the highway.
But the spillway, okay.
And I had to just kind of get a running start, cut the motor off, kick the motor up, and just slide across. We only had about that much clearance. And the grass beds, of course, were, instead of being out of the water, were underwater. So
because of the flood.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I knew where the grass beds were because I fished it so much. So I said, okay, we're going to use a heavier spinnerbait and let it get down on top of that grass. And it worked. And then I got to thinking, why does it not work everywhere? Just get the spinnerbait down a little deeper, and you don't have to fish it so slow because it's heavy. And it just kind of grew from there. And then I went, but I was still only not what I call heavy. I was still like ounce and a half. It was on down the road where I went really heavy.
Yeah. What is really heavy for somebody listening?
Most of my spinnerbaits are 2.5 ounces or heavier.
Yeah. Real heavy compared to what guys throw most of the time.
And I don't understand why people don't get it. I mean, if I see these guys talk about, I know there were a couple of guys on one of your podcasts one time, they were talking about, you ask them, well, I think my name came up in the heavy spinnerbait, and they said, you ask them what was a heavy spinnerbait they throw. One of them said quarter and the other said 3/8. And I went, oh. And you throw it out.
But that is the average that most of the guys throw.
Well, I think I told you, and you verified that 3/8 ounce is the most popular spinnerbait sold.
It is.
Okay. I will never, ever, ever use a spinnerbait under 3/4 of an ounce.
So 3/4 of an ounce to you is like a 1/4 ounce to the average guy.
That's the bare minimum, and I don't go there very often. It's an ounce, or even my little mini me's are an ounce and a quarter.
And the purpose of this, you believe, is what?
You get it down. You keep it down at a speed with those little light spinnerbaits. If you throw them out and you let them sink to the bottom, if you try to wind them fast enough to get the blades turning fast enough to matter, it's just going to ride back up to the top. It's not going to stay down. With those big heavy spinnerbaits, you can get it down to the bottom. You can wind it. You can feel the blades going thump, 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 thump. And it's 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 feet deep, whatever. I was fishing last year in January, and there was two guys out on an old roadbed, and they were throwing underspins, which, by the way, I have never in my life caught a fish on an underspin.
Really?
Really.
Okay.
I've never thrown a Ned rig in my life.
I can believe that. That.
But anyway, they were out there throwing underspins, and they were wailing on them. And I wouldn't care if I hadn't caught a fish all day long. There's no way I would go out there. But I mean, every time I looked, they were bent over. There was a fish jumping. They were breaking off. Fish were getting off. And I'm like, those guys are on it. Well, one of them was in a kayak. One of them was in a bass boat. Well, the guy in the kayak left. So the guy in the bass boat hollers at me. He said, hey, he said, you got any underspins? And I thought, he's done lost all his. Wants to see if he wants to borrow some from me.
Right.
And I said, yeah, I got a few. He said, come on out here and throw them. And I'm like, well, you're going to invite me out here.
He invited you. There you go. That's good etiquette.
Ain't no way I would have come.
Good etiquette.
And so I pulled one out and I threw it a little bit, and I don't like this. So then I pulled out a deep running crankbait and caught one on it. I said, I don't like this either. I said, let's find out. Whipped out the big blade, threw it as far as I could, let go of the bottom, started winding it in, caught it like a 3, 4, and a 5, just boom, 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 boom. So it worked just as good as the underspin.
But the spinnerbait to me has fallen out of favor for all these new, chatterbait, underspins. Why do you think guys don't throw it?
Lure manufacturers.
Okay.
You get Kevin Van Dam, or you get Jacob Wheeler, or you get Ott Defoe, or you get Jason Christie, or you get these guys, or Andy, not Andy Morgan. I can't think of his name. But anyway, you get those guys to hold that thing up, and,
it is
catch
what it
fish.
is.
That's what's going to, that's how a lure gets popular. That's how a color gets popular. If everybody starts talking about, I'm catching fish on green pumpkin, everybody's going to throw green pumpkin.
Mm-hmm.
If everybody catches fish on whatever, that's, and then you get these pros to throw them, and then you see the pros fishing them in these tournaments and catching fish on them. Then that's going to sell like hotcakes. You don't see a lot of guys throwing spinnerbaits anymore, because I think a lot of them are being paid not to. I mean, the chatterbait will catch a fish, but to me, the spinnerbait's a better choice.
And why is that?
I think the spinnerbait comes through cover better, especially like wood through a blowdown or something like that. You've got more corners and stuff to hang up on, rather than something just to slide through. I've caught one fish in my life on chatterbait.
Now,
and
how much?
I have given it a fair chance.
That's what I was getting ready to ask. How fair of a chance have you given it? I have
given it what I consider to be a fair chance. And for one thing, they ride too freaking high in the water column.
They do.
You can't keep them down. You'd have to have one weight a pound to keep it down. So it's just not a thing for me. It's just not, and if I'm going to throw something, I'll just go and throw a spinnerbait. I can build a spinnerbait to do anything I want it to do.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to fish it in 6 inches of water, I can put a light body, a big blade on a light body and make it work. If I want to go heavy, I'll put big blades on a really heavy body and I'll make it work. But I can make a spinnerbait do anything I want it to do.
What is your perfect spinnerbait setup as far as blades to weight and body color?
That's a big variable, because I'm throwing 2 right now.
Okay.
It's 2 1/4 ounces. It starts out as a 1/2 ounce head. That's the thing about it. This 1/2 ounce head that I bought turned into a 2 1/4 ounce spinnerbait. But so
when you say 2 1/4 ounce spinnerbait, you're not talking about just the head. You're talking about the entire package.
The finished product.
Okay.
2 1/4 ounces.
Okay.
It starts out as 1.5 ounces, just a body. But then I'll put a number 7 willow leaf blade on it, a number 4, number 5 Colorado blade on it. I'll put my little beads on it and all that stuff. And I'll put my big skirt, and my skirts are anywhere from 80 to 90 strands.
So beefy.
Yeah. And I had a guy I talked to at the lake the other day, and we talk sometimes. He showed me, he said, I bought me a big spinnerbait. And I said, you did? And he showed it to me, and I said, that is one pitiful looking skirt. And I showed him mine. He said, oh God, yeah. So, I mean, I use like 4.5 strands skirt layers to make my skirts. And then I run a trailer hook.
Okay. Back to the skirt. Now, is that for profile? Why do you go so much?
I want the whole thing bulky.
Okay.
I want the whole thing bulky. And I don't use a trailer, like a plastic trailer, because there's really no place to put it. You don't want it on your trailer hook, because it's just going to hang back I don't want my blade hanging back farther than my trailer hook. I want my trailer hook hanging back a little bit farther, same distance or a little farther than my blade.
That's a good tip.
Because they'll come tear the blade off. They come up and grab something, I want them to get hooked. I prefer they get the main hook, but I think I caught an 8-something, and it only had the trailer hook this year. They were nipping at it funny, because usually that's big Kong. they get the head. But I've had a couple of fish. I had a 7-something short line me. I was picking it up out of the water.
And it just had the trailer.
Yeah, and he come in, he grabbed the tail hook. But that big King Kong, 9 times out of 10, they're going to get the head. But like I say, I had a couple of them grab the trailer hook.
Now, a lot of people will argue with the trailer hook.
They can argue all they want to.
They will argue that. But I like how you talked about setting it up to where it's just a little bit past the blade.
Right.
Because I have seen on just today's smaller spinnerbaits where by the time they put and everybody now seems to run a rubber, of some sort, a Kitech or something, and then the trailer hook, and that thing sticks out much farther. In your estimation, you believe your strikes are better when that blade and the hooks are very similar?
Yep. They come up to grab the blade, which is what they're going to come after. They're going to get hook. They might get the blade, but they're going to get a hook.
Okay.
They might get the front hook. They might get the back hook. Sometimes they get both. But I do not want anything hanging. I do not want my blade hanging past that trailer hook under any circumstances.
So you think that's a mistake a lot of guys are making?
Yeah. And I ain't no way I'm going to put a plastic trailer on a spinnerbait. Not anymore.
Now, why do you think guys do it then?
Because they don't know any better.
Okay.
That's what they've been told. That's what they've been sold.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Same with the buzzbait?
Yeah.
So nothing like if you do, how often you throw a buzzbait?
I throw one a good bit in April and May, June.
Okay.
October, November.
No kind of rubber, anything on it.
Just a cheap old white skirt, and my buzzbait blades are red.
Are red?
Yep.
And why is that?
I like red.
You like red?
I like a touch of red. Bass are predators.
Okay.
Predators, it's ingrained in their DNA to go after the weak, the injured.
Mm-hmm.
Red is the color of blood.
Now, is that mostly on your higher, how do I want to say this? Your higher running baits? Like if you were fishing really, really deep,
I just put it on everything.
You just do it on everything, be done with it.
Okay. With it because
so it's a confidence thing too.
You might have a deep running bait that's going to get whacked before it gets deep. I've thrown crankbaits out that a 15-foot running crankbait got smoked before it got 2 feet down.
Okay.
So
now, how many bass? And since you are the great record keeper, how many bass over 5 pounds do you recall or know that you've caught on a spinnerbait?
Well over 400.
Well over 400. Okay.
Nearly half of all the big bass I've caught.
Now let's go even deeper into that. Of those 400, what is the number one level of the water column as far as foot depth, that you think those fish have come from?
Less than 10 feet.
Less than 10 feet. Less than 10 feet. What about the time of year for catching the trophy bass on a spinnerbait?
Obviously, spring, March, February, sometimes February. It all depends on the weather. As soon as the water starts warming up.
That was my next question. How much of the year, of the 12 months, are you throwing a spinnerbait?
12.
So you throw it year round?
Yes. I've caught big fish on a spinnerbait every month of the year.
In the wintertime, you just run it deeper? Or
yeah.
Okay, so you just change you just change the depth.
Bass aren't always real deep. There's always some shallow fish.
That's true. That is very true.
And I think me and Ryan talked about this when I was on the show with him. A shallow fish is a biting fish. They're there for a reason.
Okay, it's a very good way to say it.
And like I say, spinnerbait's a reaction bait.
Most popular color as far as the fish you've caught? White. Just straight white?
It's either all white or all chartreuse. Now the kicker blade might be a little different sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a white one. I caught an 8-pounder in February this year and I had it was all white except I had a little red kicker blade.
But it was red.
Mm-hmm. A little red in the skirt, red trailer hook.
As far as your blade color combinations, on your main willow, and I imagine that's your main willows. Do you use Colorados any?
Yeah.
Okay. Silver or bronze?
Never anymore.
Never anymore. Why is that?
I found enough to convince me that in real clear water on a bright day, a real bright flash will turn them off.
Interesting.
There used to be a place on Altoona called the Bubbles.
Mm-hmm.
It's out in front of the dam. They had 5 pipes run up from a generator up on the hill. 5 big pipes run all the way down to the bottom of the lake, and they were positioned where they came up. They were in like a 5 on a dice. And when the water started warming up in May, June, they would turn those things on, and they would pump air from the bottom of the lake up. And you would, if you look at it from the sky, it would be like a big 5, 4 corners and one in the middle with these bubbles coming up, with oxygen coming up, air coming up. And it was bringing that cold, oxygenated water to the top. So you can imagine in June and July, when the rest of the lake is nearly 90 degrees and that water's 70, you can imagine what was going on out there.
Yeah.
It was like a free-for-all. And schooling fish out there like you wouldn't believe.
Do they still do that?
No, they cut it out a long, long time ago.
Because I've never heard of that.
Yeah. Well, I never, it took me a long time. A DNR guy finally told me last year what it was all about. I heard several stories about why they were there and what they were supposed to do. I finally found out the truth. But anyway, schooling fish just out there chasing shit like you would not believe. I caught like 50 fish in 2 hours. Just wham, wham, wham. But I was throwing a little rattle trap, little liquid crankbait. I had 2 of them identical, same manufacturer, everything. One of them was chrome. The other one was what they call a Smoky Joe. They would not touch the chrome.
But they would hit the Smoky Joe.
Every cast.
And so you kind of took that information over to your spinnerbaits.
Yep. I mean, people catch fish on nickel blade spinnerbaits all the time. I just, I've settled on white. I'm convinced it's the best way to go.
So your spinnerbaits have a white blade.
Either white or chartreuse. I'll use all chartreuse rig too. And I'll use it in clear water.
Now, why do you think so many people have got in their minds that chartreuse is a muddy water color?
Well, it just makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's brighter. You can see it from farther away.
But you'll use it in clear.
Yeah. And I'll also use, when I used to fish Lake Ackworth a lot, and I first started out with a spinnerbait, I told you one of the single number 5 Colorado copper blade.
Mm-hmm.
That water was down there so dirty you could track a rabbit across it. And I was catching them on that. Fish can feed in muddy water just fine.
Yeah.
It takes them a minute to get used to it, but they got a lateral line for a reason. They don't always feed by sight. You get it with it close enough to a fish in muddy water, he'll find it.
That's interesting because I think a lot of people run from dirty water.
I would prefer dirty water.
You would prefer it?
Yeah, it just covers up a lot of mistakes. You can get away with a whole lot more junk.
Is it like duct tape and trim? It'll trim a cover it like that.
And so
now, do you think because of the depth that you fish that you can get away with the painted blade as opposed to the chrome? Maybe because it's a little bit darker down there and you're not getting that flash, or
I don't know.
What in your mind? What's the reasoning?
I just think it's.
Or is it just confidence with you?
Yeah, well, I mean, now it's confidence,
right?
But like I say, after the little deal with the chrome rattle trap thing, that that kind of turned me off with nickel blades.
Okay.
I said, if it turns them off there, why wouldn't it turn them off anywhere? You got dumb fish are going to hit no matter what you're going to throw sometimes,
right?
But ever since and it's just easier to keep up with 2 things than a whole bunch of things. All my spinnerbaits are white or chartreuse.
White or chartreuse,
yeah.
Painted blade,
yep.
And at times you will use a red.
I'll use a red kicker. Yeah.
Do you the red kicker all the time or just every so often?
No, I just started playing with that a couple of years ago just to see what would happen.
Okay. What have you found since you started doing that?
I caught an 8-pounder on it, so I'm happy.
Yeah, well, it works. Absolutely, it worked.
Now on the sometimes I'll use like the white rig. I'll have a chartreuse kicker, and sometimes on the chartreuse I'll have a white kicker. Just something to change it up, a little bit. I just fool with stuff just to see if it works. And fish ain't as picky as people think they are. They're
they are a fish at the end of the day.
I mean, they're
Let me ask you this: what is one mistake that the average angler makes when throwing a spinnerbait?
We covered this one time before, throwing too light of one.
Too light. So it's all about the weight.
The closer you get your lure to the fish, the more fish you're going to catch.
And that's why you go heavier.
It's just logic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, and I can throw an 1.5 ounce spinnerbait in 2 feet of water with no problem and still wind it, not have to burn it. Those blades do a lot of lift,
Yeah. Now you mentioned the gear ratio was like a
4.7 to 1.
4.7 to 1.
Yep.
What kind of rod do you use with your spinnerbait?
My big heavy spinnerbaits, I got a St. Croix
Mm-hmm.
Mojo Bass. I don't know the model number. It's like right at 8 feet long, but it'll handle up to a 4-ounce lure.
Okay.
I throw that on it. I throw my big, what I call my glurks. I throw a bunch of stuff. I got a big giant crankbait about that big called a Henrietta.
About the size of your hand.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I throw that on there, but I throw it on copoly. I don't throw it on braid.
Yeah, that was my next question. As far as your line on your spinnerbaits,
65-pound braid.
straight braid,
Straight braid.
even in clear water.
Even in clear water. They
Gr-
don't care.
Green, well, yeah, green colored.
Yeah.
Okay, so green braid straight to the bait. Never mess with fluoro or anything.
I tried fluorocarbon one time. I absolutely hated it. I took it off my reel, threw it in the trash, and never touched it again.
Why is that?
It's got too much memory. It just feels funny. I just don't like anything about it. I hung a jerkbait in a tree, and I went to pull a little bit, and the line did not break. It like exploded. It like splintered. Like
Splintered up.
What the?
Yeah.
No. And that was the end of that.
So no fluoro. Now, is this with your crankbaits and stuff as well, or
No, my crankbaits, I throw P-line for clear.
fluoro clear? Okay.
Clear.
What's your favorite brand of braid?
Power Pro.
Power Pro. So you like the Power Pro?
I just use it. I've got some slick.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the color on the slick. So what I do is I just take about 10, 15 feet, take a black magic marker, darken it.
Color your line.
Mhm.
And you think that helps you how?
It makes me feel better.
Makes you feel better. No scientific research on that, just something makes you feel better.
I fish by my gut, by the seat of my pants.
But that's a very detail-oriented thing that not a lot of guys, I think, would even consider. I'm going to paint the end of my line because I didn't like the color.
See it, they can see it. You know,
And you don't think they see the Power Pro green?
I don't think it's
Or as
dark.
much.
It's dark. It matches the water. Sometimes I can't see it. I'm like, where is the
Once it gets down.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. Something I never thought about. You also like to throw big swim baits.
I have gotten addicted to those.
You
things
are definitely addicted to big swim baits. Now, what is the attraction to the big swim bait other than they catch big fish? I want something
That's
better.
pretty much it.
Is that it? I knew that's
hard to go wrong with
Listen,
that.
I knew that was the answer you were going to say.
Yeah. You wheat now. You're not going to get nearly as many bites.
Right.
You're eliminating a lot of, like I told you.
But you're a trophy hunter.
Well, I mean, I like catching fish, but I mean, God, there's just something about when you set the hook on a big fish
Mm-hmm.
with that braid and that heavy rod, and and the fish does not move, and you start feeling those head shakes. My God, that's addictive.
So what was the first big swim bait you threw and where was it at?
I threw this god awful thing called a Mega Bait Charlie.
Mega Bait Charlie.
Yeah, I wish I had.
Who gave you a Mega Bait Charlie?
I bought it.
You bought it.
I found it on eBay. I started fooling around, and this thing, I didn't know at the time, but it's built on a metal frame. It's like a rubber body that's pressed to this metal frame. It's got a lip on it. It weighs about 3 ounces, 3.5 ounces, something like. I broke a flipping stick trying to throw it.
Sounds like that would happen.
Yeah, and but it just got this big wide wobble to it.
But wait a second, hold on, before we even get going, you had to have seen that somewhere, and it had to cross your mind like, yeah, that might work.
I just went to eBay and I went Swimbaits and started looking down Swimbaits.
Okay.
And I go, I like the looks of that.
The Mega Bass Charlie or Mega
Bait Charlie.
Mega Bait Charlie.
It was 8-inch.
8-inch.
And it was cheap. It was relatively cheap. It was like $13, $14.
That is cheap in the swim bait world.
And I got that. I caught a fish on that thing one day, and this is how I found out it was made on a metal frame. I hung this big fish one day. He got me hung up in a rock pile, and we fought, and we ran back and forth. Anyway, I got the fish and a metal frame back.
The rubber was all gone on the Mega Bait Charlie.
I'm like, what the heck is that? And then
you didn't know it was on a metal frame until then, right?
I'm like, what is this? You know, I said, this
that's
classic
classic right
I didn't know about.
That is great.
It was crazy.
But it worked.
Yeah. And but I, then I started looking. I got more of an idea of what I wanted swim bait to do. I wanted it to dive, but I didn't want it to sink. I mean, so that's, I think it was probably 2007, 2009 that I came across this.
What is that?
This is a Strike King King Kong.
Kong right there.
Been discontinued for, I don't know, maybe 20 years.
Okay. You would think with as popular as swim baits are these days, they'd bring it back.
Yeah, I saw Denny Brower throwing one.
Yeah.
And I like the looks of it. I don't know whether they caught any fish on it or not.
How big is that? For those that will be listening to this on iTunes and Spotify that don't know what a Strike King Kong is, describe it to them. Somebody that's listening on the radio.
1, 2, 3, it's 4 segments.
Mm-hmm.
It's got some kind of plastic device that joins the segments.
So yeah, 4 jointed segments.
It's got a little lip.
Almost kind of like a what are those that people just kind of wake bait kind of lip?
Yeah,
almost.
You can. That's the good thing. Another thing I like about this, I can wake it if I want to.
Okay,
and
so it does float.
Yes, it floats. It won't dive very deep. It dives 2-3 feet deep max.
Mm-hmm. I noticed you got a red hook on the front. I noticed the red on the front.
This one, there you can't hardly find them anymore. There's like 4 left on eBay, and they're anywhere from $40 to $60 a piece. I have never given more than $30 for one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I've got enough to last me the rest of my life.
I hope you live to be 100 now.
Well, I do too, but if I live to be 100 and can't fish, who cares?
I got you. Good way of saying it.
You know, if your quality of life goes down the tubes, I'm ready to check out.
Don't blame me, buddy. I like that.
But they're scarce as hen's teeth now. And I think I've got 15, 16 maybe left. I've had to salvage a few that I broke. When that lip breaks off, you got an issue. Mm-hmm. I was using one earlier this year, and I happened to see a crack in it, and I went, "Oh my God!" Took it out of circulation, went home, cut me a little piece of plastic the same size, super glued it to the front
to the front of that,
the stress off of it.
Yeah,
and I'll use it as a backup if I have to. But some guy had these 4 on eBay. I got 4 for $40.
Got a deal.
My goodness, that's like Christmas in July.
I bet it was.
And I didn't like the paint. You can kind of tell. It was one time. It was a funky rainbow trout color with that. You see the green.
Has some green on the head.
I didn't like the way it looked, so I just got me some silver chromey spray paint and spray paint a little bit.
I like a silver chromey.
And it worked. I caught a 9 and an 8 on this thing the same day.
Now, how do you work that?
You just throw it out and just wind it back. You can wind it as slow or fast as you want to.
Are you targeting specific structure when you're throwing one of these?
It is sometimes. Sometimes I'll just go down if a good looking bank with it just to see what happens.
Right.
But I've had them come up from, I know, as deep as 6 or 7 feet and hits this thing.
Now, what is the bite on one of those like compared to a spinnerbait?
They just stop it. You just feel it stop, then you set the hook and you start feeling that head shake. Because it doesn't move. You hook an 8 or 9 pounder on here, and you ain't going to move him on the hook set.
Makes sense. Now, when you're throwing something like that, I imagine you're going out to the water, and your goal is, I want to catch the biggest bass in this lake.
Yeah.
Not, I want to catch numbers. That's not a numbers bait. Even though you might get a small one from time to time, that's not a numbers bait.
No. I have fished 11 times this year. I've caught a total of 29 fish. And 17 of them have been over 5 pounds. Most of them have come on this. I've caught one on a spinnerbait. I caught a couple on what I call my glurk.
What is that? I've heard you say it a couple of times.
It's kind of a swim bait, jerk bait hybrid that I got from a guy up in Connecticut, of all places.
I was getting ready to say.
Why would a guy be making a bait like that in Connecticut?
They don't have big largemouth up there, do they?
No, not.
I've never heard of that. Yeah,
no. Okay. But anyway, I like the looks of it. I bought it. He made them himself.
What did he make them for up there?
I don't know.
That's just something that popped in my mind.
I got it on
right
eBay.
There.
I just like the looks of it. I caught a 10-3 on it 4 years ago.
How many bass over 10 pounds have you caught in your life?
Only 2.
Only 2. What's your biggest bass?
10-8.
10-8. Caught where?
Lake Wise.
Lake Wise.
On a jig.
On a jig. We're talking about these swim baits and spinner baits, and it was on a jig.
But my 10-3 came on the glurk.
Okay. All right.
So,
if you just own that, just in your mind doing the math, what would be the average size bass you catch on that? On that bait you're holding in your hand right now, that glide bait?
At least 5 pounds.
At least 5 pounds.
I don't catch. I mean, you'll catch a little one on, or I say little, 3-4 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
You'll catch one on every now and then. I caught 2 this year. I fished a place. I saw 2 kayak guys were all over this place because I wanted to fish it. And I go, well, screw it, I'm not going to fish it. So I went on and Came back by and they were gone. I knew they were on that place for 30 minutes, just wearing it out. And I wasn't even going to go over there. And I go, I'm right here. I'll go over and chuck it. Caught a 310, a 311, a 5
on that
in less than 10 minutes.
What's your equipment that you're throwing that on?
I have an old, and I say old, I mean an old Shimano Compre 8-foot swim bait rod. I mean, it's so old that the finish on it's blistering. It looks like crap. But and then 65-pound braid with my old 5500C.
So straight braid again.
Straight braid again.
Green Power Pro straight braid.
Yep.
Okay.
And after a while, the braid will fade a little bit and turn light colored. Then I'll do a magic marker and mark it up again.
That was my next question. Do you magic marker that?
Yep. And you don't have to when you first use it because it's good. It's the color I like.
Yeah.
But as time goes on,
but Power Pro does fade as time goes on.
And I just
let's hit that darkening again. Just 10, 15 feet.
Yeah.
And
maybe
that's
not
all.
even that much.
Just enough to get it away from the bait. Clear water, dirty water. Does it matter whether you're throwing that?
Nope. What's cool is when you see one come up and hit this thing.
Oh yeah, I'd love to see it.
I mean, it's. I had one. My son-in-law was with me one day, and we both watched one swim up and eat it so close. I didn't ever have to turn the reel handle. I just set the hook and just wore him, and we netted him right there.
Now, speaking of seeing, do you use electronics in any of your fishing?
I've got up until 2 years ago.
You're not using a flasher, are you?
I've got a flasher on my boat.
Do you still have the flasher on your boat?
I've got an old Eagle Silent 60 on my flasher on my boat. I've got it sitting next to a Garmin Striker. Let me see. Garmin Striker 5 CV.
Right.
It's just down imaging. It's all it is.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to set a waypoint.
Okay.
I've got to learn. But I don't even know how to
But you don't use none of this forward facing sonar or anything like that.
Never will.
And never will.
I don't need it.
That was what I was getting ready to say.
What do I need it for?
Do you, with what you're throwing, do you even need anything like that?
And it's funny because I see guys on the lake now. Every time I go to the lake, these guys are all going to have neck trouble before it's over with.
They're all looking down, aren't they?
And they won't throw until they see a fish. And I'll tell you this: I was talking to my brother-in-law, and we were talking about that stuff, and he said, I asked, I'm not going to say who he asked, but he was a very, very, very well-known fisherman in this area.
Okay.
He is a very well-respected guide. He asked him about them. He said, the bad thing about them, he said, they will make you fish for fish that you can't catch.
Because you see them, you know they're there, and you think in your brain. Are. Well, that's true.
They could be stripers, they could be hybrids, they could be catfish, they could be carp, they could be any friggin' thing. But I see it every time I go. I was on the lake last week, and there was a guy up there in a kayak. And I talked to him before we went fishing, and I've seen him up there several times. We talk every time we see each other, and that's all he does. He will not make a cast. And I don't know how good he did that day, but I went out and had 4 fish that weighed over 25 pounds.
Just casting. You just see something that looks good to you, and I'm going to throw to it, and just throw to it and move on. Throw to it, move on.
So, but I
now, do you, with that being said, do you target like points, or are you looking for blowdowns, or you just go fish?
I look for any place that I think will hold a fish. I don't just go blindly go down the bank. If a bank looks good, I'll fish it. But I'll try to find a point, a blowdown, a lay down, a rock pile, something.
What makes a bank look good to you?
It can't be. That's going to depend on the time of year.
Okay, let's just say right now we're recording this late March.
My biggest thing is I want shallow water, close to deep water.
Okay,
that's my thing. I'm not going to go way, 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 way back in a little pocket that's knee deep for 100 yards. I ain't going back in it. I'll fish what I call the transition from deep to shallow.
Okay.
And then again, I'm talking largemouth. I don't know a whole lot about spots. I mean, I can,
it is kind of refreshing to have somebody in this area that targets largemouth, because most of the people we talk to, spotted bass. Yeah.
And I mean, I went to Lanier one day, I won that trip with Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
And
Kevin Underwood, lipsticker fishing.
Kevin showed me a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a lot from Kevin that day. just about where to go, what to look for, stuff like that. And so I brought my little happy butt back up there about a month later in my boat. I was all over fish. I just couldn't give them a bite.
Because of the way what you were throwing?
No, I was throwing the same stuff that me and Kevin threw that day. We finally caught them on.
Yeah, welcome to Lake Lanier.
Yeah,
just like that.
I mean, it's funny because I got the video, and you see me. I'm winding. I'm fixing to hook my spook up and move, and all of a sudden, over you see behind me, you see fish blowing up, and I hear it. So I turn around, I shoot my spook right out there in the middle of them. They knocked my spook about 3 feet up in the air, and I ain't caught squat.
Welcome to Lanier.
I'm like,
very frustrating when that happens.
And then there's another one. I take off down the lake, and off the distance, you can see just over on a point, just blowing up everywhere. And by the time I get there, they're gone.
Okay.
I wound up catching one fish.
One fish a day. It happens.
It got so hot. I'm like, I'm out of here.
What is the best large lake you've ever fished, and the best, say, medium-sized reservoir?
Alatoona used to be an ungodly good wintertime lake for big fish.
And Alatoona has a reputation for small fish around here.
Well, I mean, it's 90% spotted bass, and the spotted bass ain't big.
Not in that lake.
Yeah. So, we call Alatoona specials, pound and a half, whatever. However, they are getting bigger.
They are.
And I confirmed that with the biologist because he asked me for some of my pictures from back in the spring, because I go up there April and May and I fish a lot, but all I do is topwater. If they won't hit topwater, I take my toys and go home. But they're getting bigger. I caught several in the 3-pound class, pushing 3 pounds, 3 pounds.
Which is a very good spot for Alatoona.
And you catch them on topwater, it's even more fun. I was kind of upset because I wasn't catching hybrids. Because like I told you,
you wanted that hybrid.
Hybrids get bigger.
Yeah.
And I caught a couple of 5-pounder up there a few years ago. And there used to see a lot more hybrids in the areas where I fish. But I just, and the day I ran into that biologist up there, they were shocking. I was asking him, I said, where'd all the hybrids go? He said, well, you go up the lake. He said, there's a lot of them up there. I said, well, we used to catch a ton of them right here. He said, well, they just move around. And the very next morning I went up there and I caught one. It was dark, so dark the camera didn't hardly pick it up, my GoPro. But I had like a 412 just annihilate my hybrid water play. Yeah, right at the boat. And
just to let you know they're still there.
Yeah. And I caught another one a couple of days later, weighed almost 4 pounds. But I used to catch more hybrids than bass. Now it's the other way around. And I mean, that's fine, but I'd a whole lot rather catch a 5-pound hybrid than a 2-pound spot.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But, I'll take what I get because it's topwater.
But you like Alatoona.
Alatoona Wise was also unbelievable.
Now you said was.
It ain't the lake it used to be. No lake around here is what it used to be, unfortunately. The pressure just beats them to death. Largemouth, you got guys, you go up in April and May and you'll see guys on their trolling motors going down the bank. They ain't got a rod in their hand. They're looking for beds. They're looking for largemouth on beds. Well, that doesn't do the largemouth population any good because they're going to pull that fish off the bed. They're going to take it to the weigh-in. Hell, it may not even live, much less respawn, spawn.
Right.
So that takes its toll. 30, 40 years ago on Alatoona, you didn't see many people fishing up there in the wintertime. My God, now there's 30, 40 boats on the lake every weekend.
Probably every day.
During the summer, there's a tournament every night. Every day, literally every day of the week. Fish just can't take that kind of pressure. I don't care what anybody says.
Right.
I mean, when you can predict the demise of a lake due to fishing pressure, it's not an opinion.
Just what you see. It's what you're seeing.
Yeah. I mean, Neely Henry over there. I think you put a
TikTok. I did put a TikTok of Neely Henry. You're talking about on that TikTok, you were talking about where you used to put in how you could fish and all that. And then BASS came and all the pressure came with it.
Gone. They went up there and they caught all them fish. They take them 15 miles back down the river to Gadsden. They ain't coming back.
Yeah.
They're bass, not salmon.
Well,
they're not swimming 15 miles up river against that current.
Right.
To get back where they were. They're just going to stay down there where they are. And you just keep doing that year after year after year. And of course, now I can't even fish over at that place anymore because somebody's bought it, put a gate up on it. And the ramp was really horrible anyway.
So you were going in an old ramp back and then that's private property?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I didn't have to make the run up from Gadsden. There's a ramp right there. I mean, it was perfect.
And that was back in, what did you say, the 80s?
That was the 80s.
In the 80s.
Late 80s.
How much, other than pressure, what is one of the things that you've seen fishing that you don't like, or that you think is contributing to, the demise of a fishery?
Just tournament pressure.
Just tournament pressure. And you, of course, have already said you don't fish tournaments.
Everybody wants to be a professional fisherman. Half the guys you see now that eat, breathe, and live it 5 years from now won't even be fishing.
Mm-hmm.
They
go through that little phase to try.
Well, I mean, who can afford an $80,000 bass boat and a $50,000 tow vehicle, entry fees, fuel fees, lodging, tackle? Who can afford that?
Yeah.
I can't.
Right.
I never have been able to.
That's the side of tournament fishing that a lot of people don't think about.
No.
They see it on TV. They see the glory. They see all that. Guys bringing boats into these weigh-ins and all that, but they don't consider what goes on behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's and you better win, or you're not going to have any sponsors.
Mm-hmm.
And
you can always have pro staff.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I like to tease the pro staff a little bit,
but and the thing about it is, here's something else about professional bass fishermen. A lot of these guys on the BASS Elite Trail right now,
mm-hmm.
they ought to get on their hands and knees and thank MLF for forming that trail, because half the BAS guys went to MLF, or there never would the spots open for those guys to get into the elites. Because the elites now, half of these guys I ain't never heard of.
Yeah, that's true.
And they never would have had a spot had it not been for the MLF, the guys going to MLF. I mean, you got half a dozen classic winners that went over to MLF. But if anybody wants to learn about fishing, learn a good way to catch fish, watch those MLF tournaments.
Why is that?
Because you see everything that goes on. There ain't no bull, they can't hide anything. You see what they're doing, what they're fishing with, how they're catching their fish. You see everything. It's all laid bare.
So it's a perfect tool to learn.
Yes. The best thing ever.
Okay.
Back in my day, all I had was BASS magazines.
It's changed a lot.
And they were mostly commercials. Bill Dance, his show was nothing but a commercial.
Mm-hmm.
He's pimping whatever lure he wants to pimp that day. I like Bill's a nice guy. I've met him, but
it's a business at that point.
Back when I met him, and I think I put a little deal on the group page where in 1980 I went to a seminar up in Tennessee, and he was up there. It was a Bass Fishing Institute or something like that I went to.
Yeah.
I mean, I was trying to soak up any bit of knowledge I could grab, and there just wasn't that much to grab back then. You had a few magazines, you had a couple of TV shows, and that's it. Now you got the internet, you got
Bass Pro Shop used to be a catalog.
Yeah.
It was a catalog.
Yeah.
You probably looked forward to it like I did.
Oh, God, yeah.
Back in the day.
To get that thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I bought my first depth finder from them.
Mm-hmm.
It was old Humminbird Super 60 Flasher.
There you go.
I've still got a bunch of them.
I remember looking forward to the Bass Pro Shop catalog.
And
same stuff every year.
To go to Bass Pro Shops, man, that was like Disneyland.
Yeah, there was nothing around here at the time like that.
And I mean, I go to Atlanta at the when it finally opened up.
Mm-hmm.
But I used to hang at tackle shops. I remember the dugout when Miss Fowler had it, and it was there on 41. I stayed there so often. She got to know me so well. She asked me to mind the store one day while she went to the bank.
You've been there a time or two at that point.
And the good thing about her was if there was something hard to find that I couldn't find, she would usually find it for me and get it for me.
Okay.
She was awesome. I loved her to death. And then she sold to a guy, and I forget the guy's name, but he sold it. And it wasn't just a month or two or 3 or 4 that he died.
Mm.
And then I think the guys that took it over, they still have it.
That would be Jamie Koza.
But they moved it from the location there on 41.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I would hang at tackle shops. I would read every fishing magazine. I mean, any scrap of knowledge I could find.
Who's your favorite pro?
Oh, if you want to talk about the old guys, I like Larry Nixon and Rick Clunn.
Okay.
Clunn won 4 classics.
He's still around.
Yeah, he won an elite tournament a couple of years ago in Florida.
Yeah, he's in his 70s, I believe.
And I love Larry Nixon, but now I like Ott Defoe's one of my favorites.
Okay.
I like Takahiro. I love him.
Who do you despise on there right now? Like who is your Your
I will.
enemy.
Michael
Not
Iaconelli
enemy.
comes on, and I will
Ike.
turn the channel.
You don't like Ike?
I can't stand him.
And why is that? Is he just too loud for your taste?
He's goofy. He's just goofy. I mean, he just,
Maybe a great guy, but he's goofy.
It's showbiz. He just over the top. You act like you caught one before. Don't see how loud you can scream and carry on like a maniac. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah. He's been known for that.
Yeah. I don't care for David Dudley. Any of those guys that just go ape crazy when they catch a fish. I mean, good God. Yeah, that's your job. Act like you done it before.
Okay.
I'll think about that. I always think about Brian McCann with the Braves. Somebody hit a home run and showed up his pitcher, and McCann was waiting for him when he come around third base and just let him have it. So act like you've done it before.
Yeah.
Be
Barry Sanders. Just hand the ball to the ref.
Yeah.
I've scored a touchdown before.
Yeah. Don't go crazy. Just,
Boy, in today's game, it's changed, though. They all showboat.
It's I hate to see where fishing's going.
Yeah.
I hate to see it. It's just, and these new electronics, I don't care what anybody says, they're going to take an average or a below average or a mediocre fisherman and make him better than he really is.
It would be very interesting to see a tournament, especially with the pros. Now, it won't happen because there's too much money involved in it. Too much money. But it would be very interesting to say, okay, guys, here's your boat. You all got the same boat. You got no electronics. You got a 4-day tournament.
Or just give them an old flasher.
Yeah, just see what happens.
I mean, that's really all. The only time I use my depth finders, my electronics to find fish, is in the wintertime if I'm going to drop a spoon.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care.
But wouldn't it be interesting to see?
Oh, God, yeah. And some of the older guys, they'd be fine with that.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Who do you think of all the pros right now, if they had that tournament tomorrow, 1-day tournament, no electronics on Lake X, who would be your betting favorite?
Oh, God, there's no telling. I mean, because I don't know how good some of these younger guys are without the electronics, but, Rick Clunn, man.
You'd go with Rick Clunn.
I love the guy.
Yeah.
I don't agree with some of the moves he made early on to keep fishing, because he risked everything he had, risked his family and everything to keep fishing. I remember one day he talked about there was a tournament he went to and said if he didn't finish 4th place or higher, he wasn't going to be able to go home. He wasn't going to have enough gas to get home. That's no way to do.
Right.
But
did he finish 4th or higher in that tournament?
I guess so, because he's still doing it.
So he made it home somehow.
Larry Nixon. I love Larry Nixon.
Yeah. So you would bet on an older guy?
Yeah, because they're used to do it. They know how to, they know how to get by without the stuff because they've done it before. That was their whole career.
What do you think of Kevin Van Dam?
He's freaking awesome.
Is he the greatest ever in your mind, or who is the greatest ever in your mind?
Well,
not favorite, but who is actually the greatest?
They did a poll. I forget who it was. They did a poll. And it came down, believe it or not, to Roland Martin and Rick Clunn.
Okay.
And Rick Clunn won. But Van Dam and Rick Clunn, I mean, they both got 4 classics.
Is that what you judge it by?
No, but I mean, that's just you win a class. Anybody can win a tournament, but can you win 4?
Right.
Classics?
Yeah.
The biggest tournament of all? That's pretty high standard.
So you would say Rick Clunn would be your older favorite, and KVD would be kind of like your, not necessarily your new age, but the middle of the road guy, that
Jacob
generation.
Wheeler's pretty dang awesome.
So right now you like Jacob
Wheeler, Ott Defoe. I mean, you watch tournaments, it just flip flops every day.
Yeah.
Ott won a classic. Talk won a classic. I like Takahiro. I mean, he just fishes, man. He just shuts up and fishes.
Yeah. And that's kind you like.
Yeah. That's what you're there for. Act like you do.
So you would have Ike on one end and Talk on the other end,
I like,
and that might be us showing our age a little bit. We're not into the flashy stuff like.
Well, I mean, the thing about Ike is, if you watch him doing a tournament and he's catching fish, he'll never shut up. He just blah 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 blah. If he's not catching fish and having a rough day, it's a whole nother ball game.
Yeah,
that's why he got DQ'd from the classic for having him a little fit.
Yeah,
breaking something in the boat.
He was breaking.
Yeah, he broke the light in the boat or something like that. They DQ'd his little butt.
Yeah,
as they should have.
But you got people that are attracted to that, and companies want views, and they want. I guess that's where the money comes into all that.
That's the bad thing about what fishing's come to these days. It's all about something.
If you could change the fishing industry in any way, how would you do it? That's a pretty big question.
Yeah, I don't know. I had never thought about that. I mean, they're going to have the tournaments. Really, I'd take those electronics out of it.
So it's all about the electronics, yeah.
I mean, it's funny now. I see guys on the lake in a in a $500 John boat and $4,000 worth of electronics.
I have seen kayaks and I fish in some electric only tournaments, and they got you're right. It's a $500 boat, and there's $20,000 worth of accessories and stuff like that. I might be a little guilty of that a little bit myself.
I took a picture of a guy on the lake the other day. He was in an old bass tracker. Look at two big flat screen TVs
on the front.
Well, whatever.
It floats, and he's going to get them electronics.
Yeah.
How about this? If somebody brought you a 10-year-old boy and said he wants to learn how to fish, where would you start that kid? What technique or what would you do?
We'd start out with a float, and a bobber, and a hook, and a worm, a real worm.
Keep it simple.
Just to teach him what a strike feels like, and how to land a fish, how to play a fish. Then once that got under control, then we might start playing with artificials. Maybe something like a little rattle trap, throw it out, something easy stuff. Then you transition into like not shaky head.
You don't like a shaky head?
Plastic. I don't like worm fish at all.
That's right.
And teach him what a strike feels like. That was one of the hardest things for me, learning how to worm fish, is what did a strike feel like?
Oh, for sure.
Because they don't all feel the same.
They don't.
Sometimes it's just they'll knock the slack out of your line, and sometimes it's just mush. Mm-hmm. And
other times it's that kick.
Yeah. You just got to learn to feel, and know what your worm's doing. Mm-hmm. And knowing not to move it too much. I've heard it like counting rocks, counting pebbles. Mm-hmm. I've always told people, I said, you want to learn? I said, you want to watch what you do? And I said, go find a tall flight of stairs, put something at the top of it, and walk your bait down the stairs. Move it like you normally move it and see what happens. It jumps 15 steps at once. Just take it down one step at a time.
That is very good. I like that.
I said, and that'll give you a real good idea of how you fish your plastic worm.
That's very interesting. I've never heard of it. So I've got the golf analogy, and now I've got to bring your worms down the steps.
Well, I've had a lot of time to think about this crap. There's a little kid down the street, used to live down the street from me. He's 50 now.
Good Lord.
And I started taking him fishing when he was about 10, 11 years old.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, he pointed me in the right direction of a spinnerbait one time.
And how was that?
He loved to throw a spinnerbait.
Yeah.
And we were at Lake Ackworth, and we were down there one day, and the water was like 50 degrees or something like that. And I just felt like it was a little too cold for a spinnerbait. Well, he won't throw a spinnerbait. And I said, well, here, I tied him one on. I said, go to town. Whoa. He caught a fish. Crap. So I tied one on. I had 1 over 8, 1 over 7, 1 over 4, and he had 2 over 4 that day, all on spinnerbaits that I wouldn't have thrown in water that cold. But here, a 10-year-old kid.
And that was an eye-opener for you.
Yep. You can learn something from anybody fishing. It might be what not to do, but, it's.
If you could have one thing from all your years of experience down into one thing that you could teach the world about fishing, what would it be? What would be the one tip that Tim Hancock would want to leave behind and say, you guys need to do this?
Treat everybody like you want to be treated.
Okay. Etiquette.
A little common courtesy.
Boy, that's short in supply right now.
I don't know why they call it common courtesy, because it ain't. Or common sense, either one. There was a big, long post on the group page about that. I think a guy talked about at Lanier.
Yeah.
Just the other day, somebody blocking all 4 ramps.
Yeah.
And wanting to be a jerk about it. That's.
So just the courtesy aspect.
It doesn't, not just on the lake, but everywhere. Just treat everybody like you want to be treated.
Okay. That's something that definitely is in short supply. But it's so hard these days because everything's a competition. It's starting in high school now, and even middle school.
Even just going to the lake, going fishing,
Yeah.
Don't be a jerk,
Yeah.
I have guys, don't pull up to them, don't pull up on a ramp. Start getting your boat ready on the ramp. I never do that. I pull off in the parking lot somewhere. I get my boat ready. When I go down the ramp, I'm ready to launch.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to spend 20 minutes getting my boat ready because it takes me a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know what's wrong with people. Somebody's. I think
we're in the me first world right now.
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah,
because most of the me first ain't worth powder take to blow them up. That's just we got too much of that crap.
Yeah, the all the information that you have in all your notes and record keeping and all that, something you're going to leave behind. You want people to use it. Is just something, hey, this is just for me. What's your purpose of, long term with all that?
I mean, it's like I said, it's a learning tool. I still learn from my books.
So you would suggest people do that?
Any serious fisherman should keep a log, a detailed log of every trip, everything that happens. It's not going to do much for you the first couple of years, but 10 years down the road, yeah, it's going to be a difference.
How much do you rely on it now?
Now, not as much as I used to, because I'm pretty much settled in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know what works and when it works and how it works. But I still keep the records just to see if how efficient I'm becoming.
Okay.
Or still am.
Yeah.
I want to know, like, how many hours I fished, how many fish did I catch? How many big fish did I catch in that time? How many man hours did I fish during that year? And I've also learned, I looked the other day and I said, wow, this is really an eye opener. I look back to my first year at the end of it. I caught a ton of fish, but only like 40% of them were over 12 inches. Now 80+% are over 12 inches.
So you use the knowledge that you acquired to get better quality fish when you go out.
Like I say, throwing bigger baits is the best way to do it.
Is that the best way? If a guy goes out, I want to catch the biggest bass, does it require most of the time? I know there's always circumstances.
I mean, Kevin Van Dam caught the Louisville Lake record on a shaky head.
Yeah.
During the tournament, weighed 11-something pounds,
But you still think a bigger bait?
I think that's an anomaly.
You think Kevin Van Dam's was an anomaly?
Yes.
The bigger the bait, the more opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, big fish, it's like energy expended, value received.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to go after something it's more trouble than it's worth.
Right.
That's why these big fish will travel a good piece to hit something like that. I think the cast guys were on the show one time, and they were talking about that very thing.
Yeah.
Said, it's, and I said, I made a comment in the comment section. I said, big baits will make big bass act very aggressive in what you think is totally out of character. It'll make them get stupid. It's like a deer in rut.
Yes.
Tunnel vision.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've had three big fish this year, short line bait. One of them, I watched one last week swim up and eat my glurk. I watched him swim up behind it. I couldn't tell if he ate it or not, but I saw him turn away, and I just went, and he had it. Weighed like 6-something.
Yeah. Several times you described watching the fish eat these baits and stuff. You love it.
They'll swim right up, and I mean, I was actually lifting that thing out of the water. I mean, you can see the bait. You can see my rod's not bent at all. Then all of a sudden, you see a big white glob behind my lure, and my rod goes boing.
Right at the boat.
Yeah. Never had turn handle.
Just it was there.
Yeah.
Followed it that far.
They get stupid.
You're going to find that out with the muskies.
Yeah. This is what I can't wait.
You're going to find that out with the muskies. Before I end this, I want you to describe, and this is kind of tough for guys, but what the sport of fishing means to you, the love that you have for fishing, for catching big fish. Just if you had to put it into words, how would Tim Hancock describe his love of fishing?
Well, I mean, I love being outdoors, and just, it's something, everybody wants to be good at something, and this is something I feel like I'm fairly good at. So that's the big thing right there, that I can almost call my shots now. So it's gratifying to know that I set out to do something and I did it.
Yeah. You like the challenge.
Yeah. And I'm not finished,
Oh, I know you're not. No, I know you're not, for sure.
So, I mean, I I learn something every year. I learn something every time I go fishing,
Always evolving, always, figuring it out.
I mean, you don't want to sit there and get stagnant. You don't want to sit there, just get locked into one thing all the time, just drag a worm, you can't be one dimensional. If you're going to be a good angler or successful, you better be versatile. And that's something else I pride myself on. I'm pretty good with anything. I mean, there's some, I know how to drop shot.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather eat dirt than do it.
Right. Yeah. I know some other people like that.
I will not throw a Carolina rig.
Mm-hmm.
I've never thrown a Ned rig.
I have.
I own some. I bought a little kit. I think at Academy. It's got the, but I've never opened it.
Right. Never used it.
Yeah. I don't particularly care for dropping a spoon. If you get on them, oh God, it's fun.
Yeah.
You can sit there. I sat there on Altoona one day and caught 40 something fish in an hour and a half. Never moved the boat. That's fun.
Yeah. But
sitting there dropping on fish, and nothing happening, like, crap, I'm going to go throw spinnerbait. But it's I like the fact that I've learned how to do something pretty good at it.
Yeah.
It's
just personally gratifying for you.
I mean, and I also feel like, I don't know of anybody that fishes like I do.
No, not many. Not that I know of. You probably are one of the more unique guys, and at least in our area.
My stuff would not translate well into tournament fishing.
Mm-hmm.
Could I do it? Yeah. Will I do it? No.
Right.
Do I want to do it? Hell no.
Yeah.
But it would not translate. You're tournament fishing, you're after 5 fish. Then you're trying to upgrade. I'm trying to upgrade first.
You go straight for the big one. I get it. No, I get it.
It's just not, it's not for me. And like I say, you're back to that structured thing, which I don't like.
Yeah.
I hate.
Yeah.
If I'm on the lake and I'm bass fishing and a school of stripers comes up behind me, hey buddy, it's on like Donkey Kong. I'm going after them. And
like a dog, squirrel, and I'm out there.
You can't do that in a tournament.
Yeah, that's right.
Plus, you're out on the lake and you see so much stuff that nobody else is ever going to see. How many people have seen an eagle come down and get a fish?
Not many.
Yeah, that's just.
I have been fortunate to see that. It is a very cool sight.
Or see some deer come down and step out in the water and get a drink, or see a fox come down to the water and get a drink.
Just the peacefulness of it.
Yeah, it's just there ain't nothing like it.
I understand that completely.
It's as good as it gets.
Yeah.
And when you can go out and catch a bunch of fish doing it, oh man, that's
even better.
That's just icing on the cake.
Even better. I know you post on our Facebook group page, Fish North Georgia group page, but you have your own personal page, I'm sure. So for somebody that's listening that doesn't know you, that might want to follow you on Facebook, is it just Tim Hancock, or do you just post
on Facebook? It's
where can they see some of this fish? Or is it just, do you just post on our page mostly, or
no? I've got a TikTok thing I started.
He did. Yeah, that's right. So what's your TikTok?
It's
isn't it Fishing Lips?
Mr. Fish Lips.
Mr. Fishing Lips.
Mr. Fish Lips.
Yep.
2 P's.
2 P's.
And then I think the Instagram's the same way. I hate Instagram. They screw up my pictures when I try to put my pictures on there. They crop them, and I crop them in this way and think it's done, and then the post it's like they've chopped it this way, and I screw it and I just delete it.
Yeah.
I hate Instagram. But TikTok's kind of fun.
TikTok is fun for us. We're a little old trying to figure it out, but yeah.
Man, it took me. I got so pissed off trying to setting up an account. I was about ready to just push my computer out. Like, the little thing where you got to turn it, to line it up. I couldn't figure out how to do that. I was like, oh.
Yeah, I know. It's a young man's game, but it's fun to try. So, well, I tell you what. Listen, I've been wanting to sit down with you one-on-one for a long time, and so I'm glad that we're finally able to accomplish this. And again, you guys need to go check out his page. And of course, he posts them on the Fish North Georgia group page all the time. The man catches some serious fish. And, in reality, you keep it simple. You're keeping it simple. But it is simple.
People make fishing so much harder than it needs to be.
I know. I'm guilty of it.
I mean, like 80 colors of rattle traps. Really?
Yeah, I know.
I mean, good God.
Exactly. Exactly.
9,000 colors of this. I got one worm I throw. I got 2 colors of worm.
Okay, so yeah. So what if you had to throw a worm? What are your 2 colors?
Green pumpkin. Or black with red flakes.
Black and red flakes. Red flakes. That's what I was getting ready to say. That's awesome. Well, Tim, I appreciate you coming down and spending some time with me. And you know what? You're going to be around. We're going to do it again in a few years. We're going to do it again.
I hope so.
We are. Me too, buddy. Me
At least
too.
I hope we're around to have the option.
That's right. So we have the option. So everybody listen. Again, thank you, Tim, and thank you for taking your time, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening on Spotify or iTunes or any podcast platform. We appreciate your time, and we're going to bring you some more of these one-on-ones. We're going to start kicking these back up and start bringing you to some of the personalities that we think you need to know in the fishing world that are worth listening to. And Tim, you're definitely one of those. So thank you, and thank you guys. You enjoy the rest of your